Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool side crashed and burned at Napoli, but how did they do it? Where did they go wrong? And where did Napoli find this performance following their loss to Juventus over the weekend? Don't worry, here at the interviews, we've got you covered. So on this edition of the interviews, we're going to break down how Napoli beat Liverpool. So before we get into today's video, don't forget to give our video a thumbs up if you like it. Don't forget to click the bell below if you want daily notifications regarding our content. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. But let's get to the video. Liverpool, Napoli. Liverpool crash and burn at the end. In today's video, we're going to break down how both sides pressed in the first half, their different approaches, and then break down how Napoli won the game in the second half. But first, let's get to the lineups. We start with Liverpool 4-3-3. No real changes. The only change is that Naby Keita steps into midfield with Wijnaldum, who sits at the base, and James Milner, Salah, Firmino, Mane up front. Napoli with a different look. They stick with the 4-4-2 to an extent, but Milic comes up front with Insigne. Out in wide areas, they go with Fabian, and then they go with Callejon, and in midfield, Hamsik and Alan. Who would win the tactical battle? What surprise would Carlo Ancelotti start with? But first, let's get into Liverpool and see what they did here against Napoli. So we get into Napoli and what they did right against Liverpool in the first half. A lot of Liverpool's issues stem from the fact that Napoli were very organized under Carlo Ancelotti, and they made the right decisions with the ball and without the ball. They didn't create many chances in the sense that they tested Alisson, but they got into good positions. And like we saw in the weekend, they made a lot of mistakes, a lot of poor decision making that led to chances that were spurned. But on the grand scheme of things, you look at it and they did get the better of Liverpool in the first half. The way they did press is that they did press. When they did press from the front, they pushed the strikers out to the center backs. They could have Hamsik step out to Wijnaldum initially, and then have the wider players come across. And that was the way they were looking to go about their business in that sense. If they didn't want to go about it in that way, they would have either Milic step forward and most likely Insigne sit on Wijnaldum. They'd have the wider players push out, and then they'd have Hamsik and Alan stick to the shuttlers to ensure that they couldn't play out from that sense. When you think about it, they're trying to shut down Wijnaldum to ensure that he can't get on the ball. Keita wasn't really doing much in the sense where he could offer any sort of protection or push forward with the Liverpool midfield. When he did get hurt, we saw Jordan Henderson step into that role and Wijnaldum push forward. And with that, you have a passer that could play out of the back, who could play breaking diagonals. But for the most part, that is where they were really getting the better of Liverpool in the sense that they were more organized. And when they were pushing forward, what happened here is that they always had cover for Salah. Koulibaly and Mario Rui stuck tight to Salah, and they pushed man v man in that sense. So that is where they were going without the ball for the most part, even when they did drop off a bit. And that really helped them because Liverpool struggled to create chances from open play unless Firmino was involved. But when we look at some of the chances they did create from the pressing, they did force Liverpool into some issues. We look at the time where Alisson rolls the ball out to Arnold. Fabian comes out and he tries to press him. The pass is played into Henderson, but Insigne pokes it into the path of Albiol. Then Albiol instantly plays the pass into Milic. You have a 2v2. You have Insigne running on the outside of the inside of the recovering Arnold, but he misplays his pass. It's a bit too heavy, and that was Napoli in a nutshell. Getting into good positions, but not being able to finish the job, and that was one key element there. We also saw Van Dijk push forward, and this is when later on we had Milic block off Gomez, and then we had Insigne sitting on Henderson again. Pass is played into what should have been Milner, but Callejon gets across, and then what happens there is that leads to a foul. But that is what they were doing good in that sense, pressing from the front, ensuring that Liverpool couldn't really play out of the back, really stopping them from getting control of the deeper in their zone. And then we look at the way that they were able to combat against Liverpool's pressing. Well, what do we see here? We have the front three pushing out, because what Napoli did when they didn't have the ball was the back four ended up becoming a back three. They had Mario Rui pushed out a bit higher, and what happens is they get the width there, they get the width from Callejon, and now they're able to really have cover at the back and then still ensure that they stretch the pitch. So what happens there is that Liverpool often had their front three pushing out. We saw in the earlier stages Hamsik dropping off. What happens? He drops off, gets the ball 4v3, clips out a long diagonal into the path of the left channel, but Arnold was able to clear it. Again, that's a warning sign. At times, you would see Allan and Hamšík drop into that space, and that was what they were trying to do. We look at James Milner's booking, and what happens here is that they build out the back, and what happens is that Firmino isn't really tight on Albiol. The center back stretch out, but so Firmino, what he's trying to do is to block off the pass into Hamšík. What happens there is that Allan drops off, Allan picks up the ball, gets a first touch on Milner, then he's taken out. But as we see, they were able to play out of the back. They found ways to get past Liverpool's pressing that wasn't the greatest and a bit disjointed in the sense of them pressing from the front. They were able to press from the front and cause some issues as well. And we look at the chances, and we'll get to that in a bit, that Napoli created. Besides that, a lot of it stemmed from them simply just getting on the ball and picking up loose balls and mistakes that Liverpool's midfield and defense make. There's one more other opportunity where we have, again, Allan evading pressure from Firmino. He's able to drop it off to Hamšík, who switches it to Fabian, who's able to drop off. Arnold follows him, but then he plays it to Mario Rui. Mario Rui instantly delivers a cross into the box for Milic, who's able to hold off Van Dijk and fire a shot on goal. Not the greatest shot, but again, he was able to gain a yard and offer some sort of threat in the box because Napoli didn't really create much apart from the plays that I mentioned and the fact that Liverpool were loose in possession with the ball as well. But the way that they were set up, press from the front, 4-4-2, wide players, that could stop the fullbacks from breaking forward in Robertson and in Alexander-Arnold. A midfield that offered a bit of drive, creativity, and they were able to press in, and that was key, and they were disciplined and organized. And the reason why they shift to a back three is to offer that cover. But again, when you look at Mario Rui pushing forward, now you have to get either the holding midfielder to push out, you have to get the shuttler to push out, which creates space, or you need Salah to drop off, and he wasn't dropping off often, and we'll get to that later on, but Mario Rui was able to push forward. Carlo Ancelotti had a plan. They weren't creating that many chances, but they were the better side in the first half. Now let's get to the issues that Liverpool encountered in the first half. So then we get to Liverpool and what they were doing in the first half. Well, first we have to look at Napoli and how they were set up. Like you see, we have them in those two banks of four. What happens here is that, as you can see, Salah, when Napoli have the ball, Mario Rui pushes forward. When they don't, he's very tight with Koulibaly. They're on Mo Salah. It's virtually 1v2. So now Salah's really stuck when they try to get service into him because he's closed down and there's a spare man beside him. On the left-hand side, you have Mane against Maksimovic. But what happens here is that Leon is there, and he's able to drop off if need be to ensure that there's 1v2, and he's pressing Robertson to ensure that Robertson can't push forward. There's no overlapping runs, and that is why Liverpool's attack in the wide areas were very nullified. You could see on the other side, again, Alexander-Arnold not really looking to get forward because Fabian's there. So when you think about it, the way Napoli pressed, the way they dropped off, how was Liverpool going to create chances? It was Roberto Firmino who often dropped off deeper. He was the key player here, based on the fact that when Naby Keita was on, they needed him to push forward, carry the ball, offer that incision. But when he came off, Wijnaldum and Milner there, they didn't really get much from them. They have Henderson deeper, but Henderson is pressed out of the game. So now when you look at it as a whole, Firmino's dropping off, and you think about some of the plays, he was a key cog in most of Liverpool's best moves in the first half, dropping off here to pick up the ball. Wijnaldum is there. They play a 1-2 to get around Allan, and then you see Milner and Salah looking to break off, but they break offside. Big chance for them there, but they need to time their runs. You look at another opportunity where this time Firmino's able to get the ball between the center backs, between the midfield in Hamšík and Allan. And what happens here is that now when he's pressed, he's able to play a reverse ball between Hamšík and Koulibaly for Mo Salah, but Koulibaly was able to recover and time that run perfectly. We saw that throughout the game. We saw Arnold trying to play balls into that space. Then we saw both Rui and we saw Koulibaly cover. Now he has to cut in, and he plays the pass towards Mane, but Simovic comes across, and he makes a key intervention. So when you think about that, Mo Salah was really struggling to get into the game. Firmino was still picking up those pockets of spaces. We see Milner this time pushing out ahead of Mario Rui to the left of Hamšík. Then we see Firmino dropping off ahead of Allan. He plays that pass into the space for Koulibaly. for Salah. Koulibaly tracks it again. He cleans up. Salah wasn't getting any time on the ball. Nothing was really going his way in that regard. And then we see Firmino again, this time from a throw-in. You have Fabian dropping off a bit deeper, and what happens there is from the throw-in, Firmino gets it. He's able to play the pass around him, cross delivered into the box from Alexander-Arnold. If we have it cleared by Albiol. Comes back to Firmino, delivers another dangerous cross that Mane attacks. Ospina punches it and then gets in the way of Raul Albiol. When you look at all of their chances as a whole, Liverpool, Salah wasn't really getting involved. Mane didn't have much. Firmino popping up into those pockets of spaces, dropping off a bit deeper, trying to link play, trying to get runners in behind was key. But they couldn't get Mane in behind. Salah couldn't get the better of Koulibaly. And whenever he looked like he possibly could have, you had Mario Rui coming across as well. And Koulibaly and Albiol held their own against this Liverpool side. Their attack was nullified in the first half. And then when you think about the times when they were looking good on the ball, they ended up giving it away. Keita giving it away to Gomez. Frees up Insigne. He should score. Flashes shot wide. We look at Wijnaldum with the poor pass. We see that Napoli were getting chances. Mario Rui making a forward run from half and then playing a poor pass as well. Nothing really going his way. Callejon getting a time to deliver across from the right, but not picking out either Milic or Insigne. This was very poor from Napoli, but they were really limiting Liverpool besides the fact that Firmino popping into spaces were causing them troubles. And when we go into the second half, Liverpool had to improve and Napoli needed to find a way to be more decisive in the final third. Then we get to the second half and we see Napoli continue to dictate play. What happens here is that we look at their shape. Again, we see Liverpool pressing from the front in most cases. What happens here is that they have the front three stepping out to the back three when they do have the ball, and Mario Rui pushing forward. At times it did look like it was more of a 3-5-2 when they did have the ball also in the first half, which Callejon and Rui higher. You had Fabian more in a narrow role and he was pushing back. He was pushing back Wijnaldum, and eventually he was pushing back as high as he was pushing back Arnold. You have the two strikers, and then you have basically none of the midfielders looking to push up because they're trying to ensure that Napoli can't get balls in behind to the strikers. So what happens here is we often see Hamsik dropping in. And what happens is that you can't have Firmino marking Albiol and Hamsik. So if he steps to one, the other one's free. And both of them were key in the opening minutes of the second half, more so until Hamsik started giving away the ball around the 76th minute, where he was then subbed for Zielinski. But here, constantly just trying to get balls in behind Gomez for Insigne to run onto, for Insigne to bring down. A lot of the times he was offside. There was one time where he did bring it down, but he was unable to get ahead of Gomez. But that is where the route they were going, long balls over. The other aspect was that if Insigne, or if Hamsik did drop off and Firmino was looking to cover him, Albiol was able to step forward and he was able to play a pass. None of the midfielders were looking to push up. We look at one of the first plays where we have Insigne dropping off between Henderson and Milner. He is able to backheel it away from Van Dijk to Milic. Now Van Dijk recovers, but they back off and Milic is able to fire a thunderous shot on goal. And what happens there is that Alisson is forced to push it away. The other aspect is that we see again Albiol stepping forward. This time he finds it to the other side of Wijnaldum and Henderson. He's able to drop off. You have Fabian pushing back. Arnold, who's stuck narrow, and Salah's not tracking the run of Mario Rui, so the ball is switched out there. You have Insigne running across. What happens is that Van Dijk comes across and he's able to intervene. But that is how they were getting forward. They were pushing men forward. They had a Rui who was able to push wide. Again, when they tucked on the other side, you had Callejon who was breaking forward from somewhat of a right wing back position. There was a time where he broke free and he looked onside, but he broke free, forced Alisson into a save. He was rolled offside. Another opportunity where again, the ball was switched out and we see it delivered out from Rui to Callejon. He drives it on goal, but Gomez clears it off his line. But that is where Napoli were finding joy. Liverpool were forced to make some changes. They brought on a Fabinho. They moved him out into the center. And what happened there for Milner? Then you had Wijnaldum and Henderson. They did a better job of stepping forward and pressing. The other changes that Liverpool could make, they already took off Keita, so they brought on Sturridge later on. Napoli eventually made changes. They switched their system to an extent where they brought on Verdi, they brought on Mertens for Fabian and for Milic. They moved to more of a 4-2-3-1, or still somewhat of a 4-4-2. They had Verdi very narrow, then they still had Callejon up front, or to the right-hand side, and they had Milic there, and like I said, they were just trying to play long balls over the top, trying to get direct. Liverpool weren't pressing well. What happened was later on, as Zielinski eventually came on for Hamšík, you saw that they were starting to press higher, because what happened now is that you had Zielinski and you had Allan dropping into that space. You had them pushing forward. They looked much better in terms of winning the ball back. Some of their best plays, they weren't very good in transition. They weren't keeping the balls up top, but their two best plays stemmed from them pressing a bit higher. The first one, it's Salah stepping to Rui, and what happens now is that the ball is picked up by Firmino, who's able to slot it into that space for Salah to run onto, but Ospina was off his line quick to make an intervention. Then we had a poor pass from Mertens into Zielinski, and what happens there is that Mane is able to play the pass into Salah, but again, Ospina quick off his line again to stop any Liverpool breaks. But then you think about the final chances that are stemmed from Napoli playing a bit longer. You have Maksimovic playing a long ball. What happens there is that it falls to Mertens, who slides it to Verdi. Verdi is able to push it out wide again to Mario Rui. Arnold does eventually get to him, but the cross sees Mertens come across, and Mertens is able to guide the effort off the crossbar. Again, warning signs. Not closing down the defenders when they're playing the long balls in, not winning second balls, allowing Rui to push forward, not providing cover there, because often what happened was that they were sitting central and they had players central. They had Arnold that was tucked in by Verdi or Fabian, and they couldn't have anyone pushing out to Rui, who was able to bomb forward at every opportunity. Then we get to the goal. The goal stems from Allan switching it out to Maksimovic, who's able to find Callejon, and Callejon gets the ball and Robertson steps to him, and now what happens is that Mertens is able to make that run and drag out Van Dijk. So with that happening, with Van Dijk coming out, you see him continue his run Callejon, the reverse ball is played in there, and then that allows Insigne to run off Gomez, runs off Gomez, cross is delivered, Insigne taps it in. And when you think about the second half, Napoli were much warranted for the 3 points. Better also good in the first half too, slightly the better side. When you break it down, Ancelotti got his tactics right. Started in a 4-4-2, organized in wide areas. Most of the time, Mane and Salah were in 1v2 situations. When they push forward, they move to a back three, push Rui up. Rui and Callejon kind of operated as auxiliary wingbacks. You had Mertens, you had Insigne moving off. The substitutions were right. Hamšík was dropping off a bit deeper. For Liverpool, they couldn't get stuff going. Firmino was looking good. He was finding pockets in the first half. In the second half, they looked tired, fatigued, not pressing, allowed Hamšík to take control of the game. And now when you look at it, Napoli sit top of the table, and they will be happy that they got those 3 points because they were much needed. Whereas for Liverpool, tough result, and they host Manchester City this weekend, where they're gonna need 3 points, or else a lot of people are gonna be asking some questions to Jurgen Klopp and this Liverpool side. But let me know what you guys think. Are Liverpool in crisis? Should their fans be worried? And what about Napoli? Poor against Juventus, or not good for long spells, but they improved here. Can they make a title challenge? Can they go deep in the Champions League? Let me know. Don't forget, I upload videos every day. Don't forget to click the thumbs up button if you do like this video, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.